Welcome to the Ascend Leadership Monthly webinar series, where we'll explore real world skills and everyday experiences that shape how we lead. And today's conversation is empowerment. And I'm going to give you a hint. It isn't about them. It is always about, I was going to say about you, but it's about me. It's about us. I read an article this morning at breakfast. They were talking about community and cultural shifts. And the word empowerment was used. And the way it was used was to describe a sense of permission or maybe inspiration. So the quote is that empowerment comes from being part of something greater than yourself. That's the quote. And I love that because at the end of the day, we all want to feel trusted, connected, like our ideas matter, like we have room to lead, to try, to contribute in a meaningful way. We want to know that we're not just being managed, we're being believed in. And so that's what we're talking about today. Most leaders intend to empower their teams. They think they're being supportive, they encourage, they check in, they delegate. But somewhere between good intentions and everyday habits, the message doesn't always land. And what feels like support for one person might feel like micromanagement to another. What looks like autonomy on paper might feel prescriptive in practice, or something that might motivate one person may have no effect on someone else. So today is about getting underneath all of those gaps, if you will, because real empowerment is really a mindset shift. It's our mindset shift. Part of it is how we see people. Part of it is how we distribute trust. And part of it is how we define success. And when we get it right, we don't just unlock productivity. What we're doing really is creating space. And that space signals trust. That space invites ownership. It tells people what you bring matters. And that's what we're looking for, because when we invite people to fill that space with their best ideas, they step up, they lean in, and that's where we start to see their hidden potential come forward. Because, a lot of us, we hold something back until it's safe to show all the cards, if you will. I'm Shana, ATN. After a 26 plus year career in public accounting, I am now a consultant, speaker, and trainer. And my work is centered on something I call fearless inclusion, which I define as the freedom to be yourself and the ability to create space for others to do the same. I develop trainings and workshops focused on the inner work of leadership, hint, hint, it's I statements, right? Authenticity, intentionality, building culture, conscious communication. And empowerment is a big part of that inner work. It asks us to create opportunity for others while staying grounded in who we are. That means understanding our motivations, being aware of how others experience us, and making space for growth without clinging to control. And there's a tension built into this. There's a natural pull. We want to protect outcomes, but by the same token, as leaders, we want to push to others that we trust them. Push is probably not the best word there, but we want to signal to others that we trust their responsibility. That requires vulnerability on our part, because my success to some degree depends on your performance. And that's true in a general sense, but it's particularly true when it comes to me releasing control. And part of being fearless is learning to navigate that tension with clarity and confidence and care. My passion is helping business leaders and professionals build deep connections, cultivate safety, and thrive as inclusive, mindful, and trusted leaders. Now, this monthly series is built around the Ascend leadership model that I created to reframe how we think about leadership, because this isn't a framework, it's a mindset. You hear the theme now? Mindset, right? Internal work. It's how we show up. It's how I teach leadership and how I try to live it. Empowerment, it's its own pillar. You can see it's the E in Ascend, but like every model, the environment determines whether people feel empowered or held back. So how do all of these play in? Because there's a little bit of all of these. Authenticity. This is where empowerment begins. People do not feel empowered by leaders who seem disconnected or performative. Your clarity, consistency, and presence sends a message about whether they can trust you with their growth. Self-leadership. This is managing our own habits, our own tendencies, especially that instinct to hold on to control, right? Empowerment requires us to loosen that grip. Connection. People need to feel seen, supported, and understood before they're going to step in the spaces that you create. Without a relationship, if you just create this space and let them go in there without any connection, it's going to feel like abandonment. And empowerment isn't just about delegation, it's belief in someone's potential. Now, navigation. This reminds us that empowerment is dynamic. When someone needs to thrive, that's going to shift over time. And an empowered leadership means we're adjusting how we show up along the way. And then the last one is decisive action. This is where we go from intention to impact. And empowerment only works when it's lived out. Clear expectations, follow through, aligned behavior. So these are all interconnected when it comes to this leadership model. Empowerment, it's its own thing, but it's in all of this. When we haven't done our own inner work, our efforts to empower can feel inconsistent or worse, controlling. That's the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. And remember, leadership isn't a checklist. And I know as accountants, we like our checklists, right? But when we talk about leadership, it's not a title or a position. You've heard me say this before if you've attended these sessions. Leadership isn't defined by hierarchy or authority. Those things accompany it, but I define leadership as an outcome. And you're going to see this message over and over again today. That outcome is revealed in how others respond to us, how we inspire trust, and how we create environments where people can thrive. And empowerment is one of the most powerful results when we can get all of those pieces into place. Now, if you know me, you also know I like to start with the definition because this gives us a shared foundation. Because often we assume, we know that word, right? We assume we're all talking about the same thing. But when we start to dig in a little bit, we usually find the meanings more nuanced, more layered, sometimes more personal than we expect. So empowerment is defined as granting someone the power or the authority to do something. It's a noun. Okay, sorry, I have an itchy nose today. I apologize. Do you remember what a noun is? Right? So as I say that, I think Schoolhouse Rock. If we were on Zoom, I'd ask you to raise your hand if you remember that, conjunction, junction. Anyway, a noun is a person, place, or thing, right? That's what's in the cartoon. But a noun is also a quality. It's an idea. It's an action. This is important. I'm looking to see if something came in. Oh, sorry. I'm distracted by a comment. Please drop your comments in the Q&A. I would love to share your feedback as we go along, certainly your experiences. Now, why did I want to call out that this is a noun and that this is more than a thing? We often think of empower and empowerment as kind of the same thing. There's an important distinction to be made here, especially if we want to understand the importance of empowerment in our role as a leader. Empower is a verb. So this means to give power to someone, to give authority to someone. This is to enableize them. Don't you love that? Enable them, authorize them, and trust them with responsibility. Empowerment isn't just an action. It's the state that results from it. It's not about what you did. It's about how the other person feels. That's an important distinction I want to name because as leaders, as I mentioned at the very beginning, isn't about them. It's about us. To empower is something you do, but empowerment is something they experience. You can assign a task, you can delegate a decision, you can say, you got this. I'm going to tell you in a minute why that's probably not as helpful as you think, but just because you say those things doesn't lead to true empowerment. And that's why this conversation is so important, because when we understand the difference, we can start focusing not just on what we give, but on what others receive. And that is the shift that makes empowerment real. So, empowerment, not just a feel-good concept, right? It's a performance driver. When people feel trusted, included, they show up differently, they try harder, they care more. So I have this broken down into three areas. Engagement. People who feel empowered don't just do tasks. What they're connecting to is the why behind the work. They feel a sense of ownership, not just responsibility. So I want you to think of someone who lit up, if you will, who really stepped in when you gave them more room to lead or solve a problem. And how did that shift their energy? Now, when I was thinking about this for myself, I remember one person popped into my head. I won't say her name, but we'll call her Jane, right? We were working on a big project and it had some high stakes where I was working at the time. And I asked her to take the lead on the project. But without realizing it, what I didn't do was actually step back. What I was doing was filling the room, my presence, my opinion, my ideas. I thought I was being supportive. I was staying close in case you needed anything. But in hindsight, and what I did learn, thankfully, relatively real time, is I was crowding into the space that she needed to lead. She trusted me. She respected how I thought. She respected how I work. But she didn't necessarily trust that I would trust her way of thinking, her approach, her instinct. That's on me. That was a tough moment of self-awareness. But when I finally did step back, fully step back, intentionally stepped back, it was wonderful to see that she stepped up and she blew it out of the water, if you will. Not only was that project wildly successful, and this is going to happen when you let people give people a space. She thought of things that I wouldn't have come up with. And honestly, she probably did a better job than I would have done because she had unique skills tailored perfectly for that role. And what that experience taught me about empowerment, that's what it really means. It's not just inviting somebody in, but it's getting out of the way, right? If you only hear one thing today, okay, this is the second time I said that, but this is the second thing, only one thing. Get out of the way, right? Okay, the next one is innovation. Innovation needs freedom. People do not give bold ideas if they're afraid they're going to be shut down. So, empowerment, what it does is it creates the psychological space for experimentation, for challenge. We're going to look more deeply, actually, at psychological safety in a moment, because without that, empowerment is nothing but intention. So, we'll get to that in a moment, but let's come back to innovation, right? Real innovation, it does not come from being told what to do, right? It comes from being told or invited, let me say not told, to think differently. What we're really thinking about, what we probably are looking for, is an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is someone who acts like an entrepreneur, but within an organization. They take ownership of their work, they think creatively, challenge norms, they drive innovation from within an organization. So they're not just executing tasks, they're identifying problems, testing new ideas, pursuing improvements. It's as if the business was their own. And so entrepreneurs are proactive and resourceful. They're all the things we wanted people to be and do when we empower them, when we set them free. So what sets them apart, though, isn't just initiative. It's the mindset of possibility and ownership and impact. And that thrives where people feel empowered. And the funny thing, I was thinking about this too, is entrepreneurs. I owned my own firm for 17 years, right? As an entrepreneur, I did not wait for permission. Entrepreneurs don't. And entrepreneurs are the same way, except they're operating within the constructs. They're operating within the constraints of an organization. And so entrepreneurship requires permission and space to act, not just responsibility. That's what you're giving with empowerment. And then the last one is retention. People do not leave because they're overworked. Yes, that happens. But more often, people leave because they don't trust leadership and they feel undervalued. Empowerment signals, I trust you, I believe in your capabilities, I believe in your potential. Work is hard. This profession, it's hard work. It's also meaningful work. And we know how to do it. And if we let people do the work they signed up to do in a way that offers them growth, it creates opportunity, and we help them develop the skills they need, they are going to stay. Empowerment is all of those things. Now, I said earlier, you got this. Not as helpful as we think, right? Encouragement feels good, but it is not the same as empowerment. Encouragement is emotional, empowerment, structural. You might feel like you got this is supportive, but what it doesn't give people is the clarity that they need to move with confidence. It boosts morale, but it doesn't set direction or define expectation. So I was thinking about when I was putting this together, I was thinking about a motivational speech, right? You feel good when it's over. You feel uplifted, you feel inspired. But then what, right? Absent specifics about what you can decide, where are the boundaries, how will you measure success? Those good feelings don't translate into action. What they translate into is, I just feel good doing the same things, right? So saying you got this, it's a boost. It can energize us, but it doesn't invite us to lead differently. Without any additional clarity or space, we're going to default to what's safe. We're going to default to what's known, what we've always done. People can feel encouraged and still be hesitant. They're unsure what they actually have authority to decide. They don't know how you respond if they try something new. They wonder what success will look like in your eyes. And so reassurance doesn't clarify that. It doesn't clarify that system, if you will. Encouragement doesn't explain how decisions get made, how feedback is given, and how autonomy is distributed. When you can say, "Oh, I trust you," but if your actions don't show it, then you're still directing the steps. There's a gap between what you say and what they hear, especially if you are a strong, visible, experienced leader. Me in the room with Jane. Your presence can unintentionally dominate. So you may think you're creating safety by being available, but what they might be waiting for is a signal that it's truly okay to take the lead, to do it differently rather than doing it your way, right? Encouragement, you got this. That says go ahead. Empowerment says, I've created a space. You get to decide how to fill it. Quick look at the questions coming in. Okay. Let's talk about my little hierarchy here. I wasn't trying to make a hierarchy, but then when I was looking at it, I was like, it's kind of a hierarchy. But what am I talking about here? Ownership, right? And I'm talking about me owning the work that you give me. You are empowering me. How do I now own it? What's required? It's not a strict hierarchy. What it is really is a layered foundation because each piece supports the next piece. When someone takes ownership, it's because there are certain conditions in place. So the first one is trust. People need to feel believed in, not just that they're capable, but their intentions are good. So how are you conveying this to people who work for you or the people you're trying to inspire? If I don't think you trust how I think or how I approach problems, I'll hesitate. And even if you say to me, take the lead, I totally won't do this. I won't own it unless I believe you to trust me to handle it in my way, right? What trust then creates is the conditions for agency. Now, agency is the freedom to think, to act, and to decide for yourself. This is the space to take innovative action without being second guessed. This is how we turn that trust into movement. And that leads us to responsibility, not just completing the task, but owning the outcomes. Too often, we really do focus on tasks in our industry, and we have strict processes. There are procedures. We have checklists for a reason. But that's not where it ends, and that's not necessarily the solution. What responsibility offers is it offers that opportunity to grow, right? People are making real decisions and solving problems. The responsibility without the agency, that is just pressure. So you don't get sustainable ownership without all three of these. Trust unlocks agency. Agency unlocks responsibility, and responsibility will deepen both trust and agency over time. Now, like anything, what you see above the surface, in this case, I got confidence, action, follow through, collaboration. All of that is what empowered teams do. But those behaviors grow only when there are certain conditions deeply rooted. If you want action, you have to have trust. If you want initiative, you have to create clarity. If you want creativity, you need to give people breathing space, right? Empowerment doesn't start with your team, it's the environment you create for the team. Now, I often describe organizations as ecosystems because everything is connected. And like here at the tree, what's visible above the surface is always shaped by what's happening below it. So with this tree, you see the leaves, you see the branches, you see the growth, you see beautiful flowers. None of that exists without healthy roots and nourishing soil. Roots are invisible, but they're essential. They absorb nutrients, they anchor the tree and make growth possible. And did you know trees talk to each other? In a forest, you have the roots, there's an interconnected system that's happening underground. And this is what's happening in your organizations. So, if the soil is depleted, if those connections are lost, if the roots are constrained, it doesn't matter how much sunlight you give the tree. It doesn't matter how many times you say, you got this, I trust you. This tree will struggle to thrive. You have to go deeper to the source because what's thriving above the surface, initiative, action, resilience, it's only as strong as what's holding it underneath. So these roots, I have trust, psychological safety, openness, agency, consistency, clarity, breathing room, and feedback. Feedback for the group, not just for the individual. And breathing room, I mean time and space, right? This is what is required for people to take those safe risks, to speak up, to challenge assumptions, and lead in their way from where they are. Now, I talked about it's not about them, it's about us. Because what you believe about leadership, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, it's going to shape everything about how you show up. It informs what you delegate, how you respond to mistakes, whether you can offer that space, if you intervene, when you intervene, and how you show up when you do that. We may say we want empowered teams, but if we hold onto beliefs that contradict that, empowerment can't take root. And these beliefs are often invisible to us because they're deeply socialized through professional training, organizational culture, and lived experience. So let's look at these mindsets kind of side by side. So on the left here, I have an enabling mindset. That is, I don't need to have all the answers. And I think we all believe this to be true about ourselves. But this mindset only takes hold when leaders feel secure in their role and not threatened by not knowing. So this is a mindset that you believe leadership isn't just being the smartest person in the room. Now flip that to the other side. This is an inhibited mindset that says, listen, I'm responsible for the outcome, so I should control the process. This is a common trap. We confuse accountability with control. But when we overmanage, we unintentionally signal and communicate distrust. This can come from a place of fear on our part, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being seen as ineffective. Now back to the left side, people grow through responsibility. Well, growth happens when people are asked to carry weight. Real responsibility, not just tasks. It gives them an opportunity. It forces them and puts them in situations to practice decision-making, judgment, develop self-awareness. But it only works when they know they have support, not surveillance, right? On the flip side, inhibiting, people need constant direction. This assumes people can't succeed without step-by-step instructions. What we think of as guidance can slowly drift into micromanagement. When people aren't allowed to think for themselves, they're just going to stop trying. All right, mistakes are part of learning. This sounds obvious, and most of us say this is what we believe, but many organizations don't treat mistakes that way. If failure is punished or it's used to question competence, people are not going to stretch. They're going to do the thing they know they'll do that's not going to fail, right? So mistakes, they need to be moments of reflection, not a risk of reputational damage. Failure reflects poorly on me. Well, that's the leadership mindset that tends to drive you to be overly cautious, and you can second guess your team. You might jump in too soon, right? And not because you don't necessarily trust others, but because they fear about the appearance of poor leadership. And then the last one, trust is earned and given versus on the other side, trust must be proven first. This is reciprocity. You got to give trust to get trust. And it reflects a belief in your belief in your belief in their capability. You're trusting in their intent. It means offering trust before it's been proven. Otherwise, they can't trust that they're going to earn the space you're giving them. So they're going to play it safe, right? Wait for direction. Now, this is another important point, delegation. I think we confuse delegation with empowerment. They are fundamentally different approaches to leadership. Delegation is task-based. It's about distributing work so everything gets done. Empowerment is person-based. It's about building capacity, capability, and ownership. So delegation, this is transactional. It's what needs to get done, by whom, you give out tasks, you give out instructions, you check to see if things got completed. It's efficient. But it keeps the control in your hands as the leader. Empowerment, this is relational. This is giving people to make space, to make decisions, solve problems, and learn through experience. Not only does this require a deeper level of trust and willingness to let go, but it challenges us. And we struggle with this in particular, I think, in our industry because we're so analytical and so much of the outcome of our work appears to be objective. But what we don't do in terms of empowerment is rather than giving people the tasks, we agree on the outcome. I'm saying we don't do that. We struggle to agree on the outcome to determine what does success look like. If we knock this out of the park, this is what it looks like. And then step back and not figure out the how. So look at this in the contrast, right? Delegation says, I trust you to do what I ask, right? Empowerment says, I trust you to figure out how to make it work. Delegation, did the task get done? Empowerment, how'd that work out for you? Not just the deliverable, but the development, because empowerment is, we know it was a success, not just the task got done, but how did it go? This is uncomfortable as leaders because you might not agree with how they approach the work. But if you're overcorrecting or redirecting, they're not truly owning it either. They're performing your version of success. That's where we struggle between the line of delegation and empowerment, because them doing things our way so that we can determine that they're doing a good job is where we get into trouble. Now, what's behind all of this is a level of trust. I've referred to trust a lot. Trust is a pattern of behavior. It's not something you say, it's something people experience. Remember, leadership is an outcome. That theme comes up over and over again. Your team decides whether they feel trusted based on how you lead, not what you intend, right? Empowerment is going to live and die then in all of those little moments, not your big speeches, not that you got this, but the everyday signals. How do you listen? How do you respond? How consistently do you follow through? Do you check in? Do you see how's it going? Is there any way that I can help you? What do you need? Just check in progress, not saying you're not at this point by now. You're on track to get this done. Good, right? That's what we're talking about, the little moments. How do we do this? Well, we share the why behind the work, not just what needs to be done, but what matters. This shows people they're not just executors, they're contributors. We want to ask guiding questions, not leading questions, right? Coaching invites people to think. And so what we're doing is we're helping them build that decision-making muscle. So we might ask questions like, so how do you think we could get this done? What are some of the approaches we can take? Which project management strategy might fit this, right? What does that say? I think we need a project management strategy. What I'm not saying is do it this way, right? We want to invite input before we make decisions. This early involvement signals to them, hey, your ideas matter here. And it builds investment early into the project or into the work or into the engagement before we even start working. Now, a word about boundaries. Remember I said, get out of the way? This is not about taking a hands-off approach. Boundaries are really just making it clear where the lanes are, who's got responsibility for what. It's not being hands-off. It's not set it and forget it, right? It's I trust you. Here's the lane. Make it yours. Let me know how I can help you. I was thinking earlier today about my son, Sebastian, when he was little, and how I learned to let him fall. Now, we know when kids start to walk, they kind of tumble and it's very hesitant, and usually they plop back down on their bum while they figure out how to balance. Uh, well, what I learned is that I need to let Sebastian keep falling. My job as the parent was to ensure that he was never in a situation where the fall could be dangerous or life threatening. But I also knew I could not make his clothes out of bubble wrap, right? And expect him to grow. Falling is how they learn to balance. Making mistakes, iterating, trying again is how people learn to lead. So recognizing effort and ownership, not just outcome, and focusing only on results makes people risk averse. But if you name the courage behind the work, people will take more thoughtful risks, right? And then we want to respond with curiosity, not blame. How you handle the missteps are almost more important. If mistakes trigger control on your part, teams are going to step back. They're going to play it small, right? Okay, before I do this, let me take a quick peek because I saw a couple things come through. It's hard when you're told to do something one way. You do. Then you're told to change it. You do. But the next time you do it the way you were told to do it, with the changes, and the same thing happens again, this is difficult, especially when you're told there are many ways to do it and no way is wrong. Thank you for sharing that. That is so true. And psychological safety, I couldn't have timed this one better. Psychological safety is required in that environment because if you ask me to do it a particular way, ask me to do it, I do it a particular way, and you tell me my way is wrong, I have a decision to make in that moment. And that is to say, well, is the outcome the problem or was it the process? Just so I know where we stand and I know what you're focusing on. And that can help redirect things back to the person who you feel is challenging you. You can't do that if there isn't psychological safety in that space. Psychological safety is the belief you can speak up without being punished or suffer any negative consequences. There's 4 different levels of this. Inclusion safety is it's safe to be yourself. You're going to be accepted for who you are and the things that make you unique. Learner safety. This is a form of safety where I can ask questions, I can experiment with ideas, I can make mistakes. Contributor safety is I can share ideas, I can try some new things, I can contribute without the fear of judgment. And challenger safety says I can speak up, I can challenge ideas, I can try to drive change and advocate for new things without fear of backlash or consequences. But like every definition, this one is layered. What feels safe to one person might feel risky to another. Even the smallest everyday moment can carry risk. You can't mandate psychological safety. You can't say, this is a safe space. Because we hear people do that all the time. It requires shared agreements. Psychological safety isn't a rule, it's an experience, and it's built through how we respond to the vulnerability. So when someone says, I have an idea, or I'm not sure this will work, or, oof, I think I messed up. The next words that come out of your mouth as the leader, the body language, the expressions on your face, the decision you make, that signals to everybody just how empowered they are, just how much autonomy they have. And this is cumulative because moments of curiosity create safety. Moments of blame erode safety. This isn't about perfection. This is about consistency. So in that example, Nicole, if I feel like I can ask you, well, which is the thing you're worried about? Is it the process or the output, the result? Because I can fix either. I can change either. I just need to know what the focus is. If I can say that without being, feel like I'm being attacked because it's a lose-lose situation, I'm just going to be like, tell me what you want me to do, and I'm going to do it as best as I can to avoid future wrath. And that is a difficult position to be in. So if you're the leader in that role, what we want to try to do is notice when that's happening. I got a tip on that later. Now, I wanted to dig in a little bit more under psychological safety because I want to move past the definition. It depends on experience, that empowerment is an experience thing. I talked about that. So what I tried to do was I tried to come up with two components that really go into this. And so I came up with two factors: trust, and this is you believe that you're going to be supported. Candor is that you believe it's okay to speak up freely, direct, even if it's uncomfortable. Now, we assume people will speak up if they have something to say, but we all know that's not going to happen if people don't feel safe, right? So I have the word under candor. On the left, I have inhibited. Inhibited means they're holding back, they're filtering, they're hesitating. On the right, I have encouraged. Encouraged means they feel free to speak. They believe their input is wanted, not just tolerated, but invited. Now, on trust, you have low or high. I think we know what those mean. So, different levels of psychological safety. Bottom left, guarded. So, trust is low, people feel inhibited, right? People are going to stay quiet to protect themselves. It is difficult to empower and encourage somebody in this environment because you're going to hear silence in meetings. There's going to be agreement without any engagement, right? Very careful compliance. What we have here is an environment of self-protection. You're going to give me permission to do something, I'm going to do it very, very carefully. Bottom right is the strategic zone. So here we're a little more open. We're more encouraged in our communication, but there's still low trust. So here people will speak up, but it's going to be a little more calculated. Sometimes it's cautious. You might get some feedback, but it's likely diluted, possibly polished. So it's going to look like candor, but underneath that, there's still some fear. So there's hesitancy. You're empowering me to do something. You're giving me permission, but I'm going to be treading very lightly. Top left, relational. Now there's a high degree of trust, but expression is still a bit inhibited. And this can feel kind of like a contradiction in terms. But what we mean here is that people will feel supported and respected, but they want to avoid tension. Disagreements are avoided. Hard conversations don't happen. Dissent is softened. There's trust, but it's fragile because it probably hasn't been tested. So if you offer me an opportunity here and I step into it, I'm going to trust the opportunity, but tread very carefully on how I talk about what I'm navigating. And then the right ideal is the empowered zone, empowerment zone. Weird name, but this is the zone we're aiming for. High trust, high candor. People can challenge ideas without being seen as difficult. They can admit mistakes, speak honestly, and they can stretch themselves because they know they'll be met with curiosity, not control or correction. What's powerful, what I like about the 2x2 model, I made up the model, but what I like about it, what I'm proud about it, I guess you could say, is that you can see how it's possible to move between zones because relational cultures can shift those empowered zones. Guarded teams can build trust. Trust can be broken, but it can rebuild, and it can be even stronger when it's rebuilt. But only if we're willing to look honestly at where we are now and the behaviors we are enforcing. So what shapes those behaviors? It's that ecosystem that people are operating in, tone, patterns, unspoken rules that tell us what's actually safe. We're talking about a whole host of things like cultural norms, group dynamics, relational power, social constructs, all that kind of thing. So look at these 4 boxes. Ownership carries emotional risk. So you're going to empower me with something. You want me to own something. But the emotional risk here is I'm putting my name, my voice, and my judgment on it. And people need to believe that that risk won't be used against them. Risk-taking is a behavior shaped by the environment. This is the one in blue. We say we want people to speak up or think differently, but do we reward it or do we just tolerate it? So are you recognizing people only when they stay in bounds, when they color in the lines, if you will? Because if that's the case, it's the behavior you're going to get. Down here, bottom left, autonomy doesn't feel the same for everyone. It's easy to say, take initiative, but without support, especially for those who feel marginalized or sometimes have a history of feeling second guessed. Remember I said earlier that, hey, here's the space, go for it, can feel like they're abandoned. And then the last one, safety makes experimentation possible, not just allowed. Anyone can say, we support trial and error, but real learning happens when failure is normalized. When people can stumble, regroup, and try again. When we ask questions like, so what did we learn here? What can we take with us moving forward? Looking at all of these behaviors, these are not just isolated habits. They're symptoms of something usually deeper. And so many of these disempowering behaviors can be traced back to a lot of that psychological safety that I was talking about. When people don't feel safe speaking up, they're not going to ask for what they need. And if no one's asking questions, leaders already are unsure of who's struggling or who's doesn't feel like they have the confidence to not overcorrect, if you will. So leaders start to control the process, not because they want to, but because that silence makes it feel necessary, right? So that's how we can slowly slide into micromanagement. Where there's no space for honest conversation, clarity disappears. People aren't going to say when they're confused. You know that saying, you get what you pay for? Well, if we invest in vague direction, we get vague results. And the feedback, it only gets filtered, especially when it's upward feedback. People will protect themselves by offering only what's safe. So this means as a leader, you're not getting real information and team performance is limited. Now, I've included these next 3 slides. These come from the April session on confident decision making. I don't need to spend a ton of time here, but I thought these were important to reinforce because relational power is the influence someone holds. And the relational power itself isn't the problem. It isn't inherently bad. We use it to strengthen trust. It can allow us to be mentors and sponsors and champions. It might put us in a position in title or reputation or influence to help someone grow and to succeed. But the challenge here is that relational power can elevate or it can protect, depending on how it's used. That can be the difference between true empowerment and what we feel is empowerment, but is being received and experienced as delegation. Power dynamics. So power dynamics are how that relational power get expressed or felt within the group or the organization. They're the visible and invisible ways power shows up in our interactions. So it shapes who speaks, who gets heard, who feels safe to contribute. And as a result, it will directly influence how much I am willing to stretch, how much I am willing to reveal, right? Unlocking those hidden talents, if you will. If I feel like there are certain people who get heard, and if I don't feel like I'm one of those people who gets heard on a regular basis, then there's no reason for me to speak up. So empowerment entirely depends, effectively anyway, on the power dynamics in the room. And then earlier, I meant to call this one out, but there are a lot of things that we hesitate on. And hesitation, not the I need to be thoughtful pause, but the hesitation about where I'm stuck pause. And the reality is that leaders are expected to move, make decisions quickly, communicate, stand by them publicly, right? And empowerment of somebody who's not yet in that official leader role makes us all vulnerable, which is why we might hesitate. We don't want to make a mistake. Let me just make sure I got this right. I'm going to overanalyze. I'm going to overthink. I'm going to stall, right? Remember in that zone where we have a relational zone where we avoid discomfort, we avoid hard conversations, or we're constantly needing validation. So while my intent is to create space for you, if you constantly feel the need to come checking in with me, that's where we can have problems. So now I talked about psychological safety. This is a really great infographic to talk about how do we develop it. So the first thing is say it, make it explicit, talk about the importance at work, create those shared agreements like I was talking about. Show curiosity, honor frankness, right? Be open-minded and listen when someone's brave enough to say something that's different or challenges the status quo. So how are we going to handle failure? Maybe we don't call it failure. We talk about a reframe. What did we do wrong? How did we learn from this? What do we need to remember from next time? As I said those a little earlier. We want to create recognition that mistakes are opportunities to grow, not things to be fixed in the negative sense. Create space for new ideas, even wild ideas, right? Consider whether you only want ideas that have been thoroughly tested or whether you're willing to accept creative, out of the box ideas. I've got a couple of tips here coming up in a second on some of the things that we can do. But before I get to that, this last step, number 5, embrace productive conflict. This means productive debate, constructive debate. Set the stage for incremental change by allowing us to work through these little moments with safety. So, what does this look like in the positive sense? Well, we can't just focus on effort. I said this earlier. We need to look at initiative as well, because if we stop with effort, we're missing an opportunity to support what's underneath that effort. When someone takes initiative, they're not just doing what they're asked, they're stepping in, they're doing that entrepreneurship thing, if we're getting it right, right? So, with initiative, the mindset is seeing them as the contributor, not just the person doing the task. With experimentation, the mindset here for us, the mindset here for us shifts from control to curiosity. I want to understand how they're thinking. What's their process? Tell me more, right? And then learning from failure. When it comes to that, this is a mindset where we need to show care, where we're not shaming somebody because people don't grow. Shame is toxic, right? So, what are some things, right? How do we model this? I've covered a lot. Well, here are a couple of ideas. These are simple, everyday statements. They're nothing fancy, but the impact is big. Remember, I said it's in all the little things we do every day. So I should have given you more context. That's on me. That shows that I'm not trying to shift the blame. I'm telling the other person, you weren't set up for failing. I missed something, right? Or I realize I've been holding on to that decision that should have been delegated, and here's why. So I'm modeling humility. I'm showing some transparency. I'm letting you understand what I was thinking. Or what about this bottom one? I realized I've been focusing on the inputs and not the outcomes, right? Let's circle back. Well, why is this important? Excuse me. Because again, vulnerability. I am not afraid to course correct in service of the bigger goal. So, what I'm trying to model for you is the tone that is safe for you to take as well. The flip of this is also true. It's great to model the right behaviors, but we grow as leaders and we're going to get better at this empowerment thing when we start to understand where we might be undermining our own intention. I describe leadership as an outcome, and it's revealed in how others respond to us. So we need to be able to read the temperature in the room, or I should say, read the environment. It's kind of like the read the room, but at the systemic level. Our growth happens when we notice the patterns that aren't working. So these patterns help us see that outcome more clearly. I've created a worksheet to help you do what I call an empowerment self-check. It's one of the handouts. I encourage you to download it because what it's inviting you to do is go through some of these reflections. On the left here is a behavior or a pattern that if you try to spot for it, you might start to notice it. And on the right, if you notice it, that's what it might be telling you. And when you can start to see that happening in real time, you'll start to develop the muscle to not do the thing. How do you develop it in real time then? Well, 3 steps, each on their own, and also a loop. The first one is notice. It requires us to step back and observe, no judgment, right? If someone seems disengaged, pause and ask, are they unclear? Are they stuck? Or maybe they're holding back. The behavior may be visible, but the reason behind it usually isn't. So this is simply noticing it. We may not need to do anything yet. This is developing the notice habit. The second is adjust your approach. Once you notice something is off, how do you recalibrate? If you're offering too much direction, are you crowding them out or are you leaving them alone? Do they feel abandoned? If you've pulled too far back, what feels like empowerment to you is landing as neglect, right? So we want to try to find that balance. Earlier I said, get out of the way, but I didn't say go away, right? I didn't say let it go. And then the third is resetting expectations. Remember, as dynamic shifts, as need shifts, that navigation, right? That people, as their capacity grows, we need to adapt. That's like taking off the bubble wrap on my son, right? So, last thing, empowerment doesn't mean you have all the answers. What you're really trying to do is put people in a position to be successful. So each one of these questions are questions that you can take to somebody who reports to you, somebody who you are trying to create that space for, to invite reflection, to invite ownership, to bring in their voice. This is just an example of a number of different questions that you can consider. If you go back to that worksheet, what I love about the worksheet is it allows you to reflect from two sides: how you think you're doing, and then try to step back and look at yourself more objectively at how you might be being experienced. And when you triangulate these things together, you might be able to start to see which of these questions might be helpful for you because they're a signal in their response to areas where you need growth as well. And I'll leave you with this last thought. You can say all the right things, all the words, ownership, opportunity, delegation. You can say all the ones where you think you're signaling empowerment. I trust you. This is yours. Right? Take the lead. But at the end of the day, people respond to what we do, not what we say. Those are the cues that I was just talking about. When we talk about environment, it's not just saying the right things or having the perfect answers. It's consistently showing that we see people, we believe in them, and we are creating space for them to do their thing, right? So this is the worksheet that I was talking about, the empowerment self-check. You should see it in there as a PDF handout, so I encourage you to download it. Before we go to real quick questions, we have about 5 minutes left. Not that one, this one. Next month is already open for registration, Communicating with Clarity and Impact. That's going to be on August the 22nd from 3 to 4 p.m. And if you go onto the website, you can see the full schedule. So you can scan this QR code to register, or at the bottom here, my website /ascend, you can see the full schedule. You can sign up to get notifications when the next one opens for registration. Right now, registration is only open through August. This is a monthly series, something different I'm trying for this year, and I would love for you to join me, same place, same time, right, if you will. All right, let's go to some questions. Let's see what's coming. Okay. I don't know where I am. Have you put anything in priority for me?
One moment. Yes, I have.
Okay. Do you have recommendations for how to deal with team members who are lacking certain inherent skills, such as analytical skills, that are critical for them to perform their job successfully? So, couple things there. From an internal perspective, for how you're showing up as a leader, the questions are going to be things like, what have you communicated to them that they need? Have you ensured that they have the skills that they need to be successful? When you're providing feedback, is the feedback the type of feedback that is, you didn't do this right, so don't do that again? Or is the feedback, I can see that this is a challenge. How can I help you in this space? Or what can we do to develop a plan for the growth and improvement? This is having them work with you and collaborate with you in that. If they're lacking certain skills, there's also the chance somebody's not the right fit for the job. This is difficult. This is where for you, you have to be willing to take that decisive action, have some of those uncomfortable conversations. It could simply be assigning them a different role, putting them on a different engagement. It could simply be a question of training. But at the end of the day, this is more about you as a leader and how you navigate that difficult moment, that difficult situation, or that particular employee. Because what they need to be successful, what they need for you to openly and freely empower them, will come down to whether they feel abandoned, whether they feel supported, whether they understand what you've been asking for them, and whether they're used to functioning on their own without having to come to you. So there are a lot of dynamics that could be going on there. With the 3 elements of the foundation of ownership, which level do you think is the most vital for leaders in the accounting industry? Well, let's go back to that and look at this one. I think, Mary, you're talking about this one. So which of the 3 levels is the most vital? And I will say the answer to this, which is the most important, A, B, or C? Yes. I don't say that to be sarcastic, although I'm saying that to be sarcastic, but I'm not. These are all interchangeable, and you can't take one out and expect to be successful. So trust, for example, is critical in our area. Our clients are trusting us, so we have to trust our processes. Trusting our processes means we are also trusting our people to execute those processes and to let us know if something's not working, something can be improved. That creates space. That requires a level of empowerment. Agency means if something comes up, they have to handle it. That requires trust, but it also means I've had to give them permission to do this without risk. And then the last one is responsibility. That's how people grow. Remember, people don't grow because they play it safe. People grow because they are given something to carry and we support them. We're not putting them in bubble wrap, right, as a parent, but I'm not setting them up for failure. So unfortunately, Mary, I would say there isn't any one that is the most vital for leaders in our industry. I think all of them are important and they also vary by context, situation, and culture. And with that, I would say thank you all for joining me. If you're interested in learning about other programs that I offer, you can scan this code and get some time on my calendar. Send me an email, message me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. And I really do hope to see you next time.